The first time I realized my name had been removed, I was standing in a marble lobby, holding a box of pastries no one had asked for. The security guard looked at his screen, then back at me, polite but firm. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You're not on the approved list anymore." Not on the list. I was 62 years old, wearing a tailored navy coat, hair done the way it had been for decades. And I was being told I no longer existed in the place I had helped build. "My name is Eleanor Whitaker," I said calmly. "I've worked here for 19 years. He shifted uncomfortably. "I understand, but you'll need authorization from Human Resources." Human Resources. The department I used to run. I stepped aside, my hands steady even as something cold slid through my chest. The glass doors reflected my face back at me, composed, professional, unreadable. No one walking past guessed that my entire life had just tilted. This was how it started. Not with shouting, not with a dramatic betrayal, just a quiet erasure. 3 hours earlier, I had been at home in Brookline, Massachusetts, packing a small box of pastries for a meeting I wasn't sure I was still invited to. It was December, the week before Christmas, and snow dusted the front steps. I remember thinking how peaceful everything looked, how earned that peace felt. I had spent my career at Norwick Financial Group, a mid-size investment firm with old money clients and newer ambitions. I started there at 43, newly widowed, with 2 teenage daughters and a mortgage that did not care about grief. Over time, I became indispensable. Not flashy, not loud, just reliable in the way institutions quietly depend on. 5 years ago, my son-in-law, Marcus Hale, joined the firm. Marcus was married to my younger daughter, Claire. He was charming, ambitious, and very good at letting people underestimate him, until it benefited him not to be. I had recommended him for an analyst role. I had believed in family helping family. That belief would cost me more than I understood. The shift did not happen overnight. It never does. It started with meetings I was no longer CC'd on. Strategy calls scheduled last minute. Decisions made and presented to me as facts. Marcus rising quickly, praised for leadership, vision, decisiveness. My role slowly reframed from architect to administrator. Still, I stayed quiet. I had always believed dignity was power. Then came the will. My mother, Ruth Whitaker, had died the previous spring at 91. She left behind a modest but meaningful estate, a house in Vermont, some investments, sentimental pieces that only matter to families until they tear them apart. Ruth's will named me executor. 2 weeks after the funeral, Marcus called me into his office at Norwick. "Eleanor," he said, folding his hands like a mediator. "We need to talk about optics." "Optics," I repeated. He smiled thinly. "You managing both the firm's compliance oversight and your mother's estate could look like a conflict, especially with Claire involved." Claire, my daughter, the one who had stopped calling unless she needed something. I reminded him that the will had nothing to do with the firm. He nodded. "Of course. But perception matters. We just want to protect you." Protect me. I agreed to step back from a few visible responsibilities. Temporarily, they said. That was the first concession. The second came when I discovered that Marcus had been meeting privately with the board, without me. The third came the morning I arrived with pastries and found my name missing from the list. Standing in that lobby, I understood something I had not wanted to see. I had not been pushed out. I had been replaced. And someone had been preparing for this longer than I realized. I turned away from the desk, pastries still warm in my hands, and walked back into the cold. My phone buzzed. A text from Claire. "Marcus says you're upset. Can we talk later? You're making things very tense." I stared at the message. Then I looked at the building behind me, the place where I had given almost 2 decades of my life. I did not reply, because I knew with sudden clarity that this was not just about a job. This was about inheritance, power, silence. And I had been silent long enough. The hardest part was not losing my position. It was realizing how carefully I had been managed. The week after the lobby incident, I was officially reassigned. My title remained, but my authority evaporated. Files rerouted, decisions delayed, conversations ended when I entered the room. I was still there, but no longer central. That was when the emails began. Anonymous at first. Polite. Concerned. Just wanted to make sure everything is okay with you lately. You seem under a lot of stress. Have you considered stepping back fully? The language was soft. The intent was not. By January, Human Resources requested a wellness check, framed as support, documented as concern. I complied. I always did. At home, things were no better. Claire stopped by one afternoon, unannounced. She stood in my kitchen, arms crossed, scanning the space like she was preparing a report. "Mom," she said carefully, "Marcus is worried about you." I poured tea. About what? About how you're handling everything. The firm, Grandma's estate. You've been very rigid. Rigid. The word stung because it was so familiar. How many women my age had been described that way when they stopped bending? "I am following the will," I said. Claire sighed. "Marcus thinks it would be better if he helped manage some of the assets. For transparency." I laughed then. Just once. "Your husband works at my firm," I said, "and you think he should help manage my mother's estate." She looked away. It would make things easier. For whom? She did not answer. That night, alone in my living room, I spread out my mother's papers across the dining table. The will, the trust documents, old letters written in Ruth's looping hand. And then I noticed something. A codicil, added 6 months before her death, properly notarized, perfectly legal. I had missed it. It changed everything. Ruth had amended her will to include a conditional clause. If any beneficiary attempted to interfere with the executor's authority or coerce redistribution of assets, their share would be placed into a discretionary trust, controlled solely by the executor, for a period of 10 years. 10 years. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding. The room, suddenly, very quiet. Marcus had not known this. Claire had not known this. And the board at Norwick certainly had not known that the woman they were quietly sidelining still held legal authority over assets far more influential than any title they had taken from me. That was when the anger finally arrived. Not explosive. Focused. I did not confront anyone. I did not send emails. I did not raise my voice. I called my attorney, then my accountant, then a private investigator recommended by a woman I trusted who had survived her own professional burial. I asked one question: how long has this been planned? The answer would take time, but I had it. And for the first time since my husband's death, since my daughters grew up and stopped needing me, since my career became something others felt entitled to rearrange, I felt something steady return. Control. They thought I was being eased out. What they did not know was that they had triggered a process my mother had quietly prepared me for. And Ruth Whitaker had always believed in consequences. The investigator's name was Harold Pierce. He was in his late 60s, soft-spoken, with the kind of patience that only comes from having watched powerful people unravel slowly. "You don't want fast answers," he told me during our first meeting. "You want correct ones." I nodded. Correct was exactly what I wanted. While Harold worked quietly in the background, I returned to Norwick every day as if nothing had changed. I smiled, I took notes, I listened. I let people underestimate how closely I was watching. That was when I noticed the pattern. Marcus was not just ambitious. He was consolidating. Vendor contracts rerouted through shell consulting firms. Compliance shortcuts justified as efficiency. Client introductions happening outside official channels. None of it illegal on its own. Not yet. But it was coordinated. One afternoon, I overheard Marcus in a conference room. Door ajar, voice low. "She's slowing things down," he said. "The board agrees. We just need to create enough concern to justify transition." Concern, the same word Human Resources had used. That night, I went home and opened my personal laptop. I logged into an old cloud account I had not touched in years. Inside were archived emails from my early days at Norwick, conversations with founding partners, early strategy memos, decisions Marcus now took credit for. History has a way of defending itself, if you let it. The next morning, Claire called. "Mom, Marcus says you hired someone to look into him." "I hired someone to look into the firm," I said calmly. "That is my job." Her voice sharpened. "You're making things worse." "Worse for whom?" She paused. For all of us. That was when I understood the full shape of the betrayal. Claire was not caught in the middle. She had chosen a side. The following week, the board scheduled a closed session. I was not invited. Instead, I received a carefully worded email offering an early retirement package. Generous, gracious, final. I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to my attorney. 2 days later, Harold called. "You were right," he said. "This started 18 months ago. Marcus has been positioning himself as your successor, quietly undermining your credibility, feeding selective information to the board. He's also been accessing estate-related financial projections through Claire's shared devices." I closed my eyes. "So, my mother's will," I said. "They assumed I would fold." "Yes," Harold replied. "And when you didn't, they escalated." That night, I drove to Vermont. My mother's house sat on a hill overlooking bare trees and frozen ground. Inside, everything smelled faintly of pine and old books. I lit a fire and sat at the kitchen table. Ruth's letter spread before me. She had known. She had always known what family could become when money and power intersected. One letter, written in shaky ink, stood out. "Eleanor, if you are reading this, it means someone you love has decided you are in the way. Do not confuse that with failure. Being in the way is often proof that you still matter." I slept deeply that night. The next morning, I made my decision. I would not fight to stay. I would let them push me out, and then I would expose exactly what they had built on my silence. My resignation became effective at the end of February. The firm sent flowers. Marcus sent a note thanking me for my years of service. Claire did not call. I walked out of Norwich for the last time with my head high and my files intact. They thought the story was over. It was just beginning. Within a week, my attorney sent formal notice to all beneficiaries of my mother's estate, including Claire. The codicil was cited in full. Any attempt to interfere with my role as executor or manipulate asset distribution would trigger the discretionary trust clause. Claire showed up at my door that evening. She was pale, eyes red. "You blindsided us," she said. "I followed the will," I replied. "You're punishing me for being married." "No," I said quietly. "I'm protecting myself from being managed." She sank into a chair. "Marcus says you're doing this out of spite." I met her gaze. Marcus says many things. For the first time, doubt flickered across her face. Over the next month, Harold uncovered more. Emails, financial irregularities, a pattern of pressure placed on junior analysts to adjust projections to support Marcus's preferred outcomes. None of it public yet, but enough to matter. I requested a meeting with the board. They declined. So I requested one with a regulatory attorney instead. In April, a formal inquiry was opened into Norwich's internal compliance practices. Quiet, confidential. Marcus called me that night. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "I am letting professionals ask questions," I said. "You're destroying everything we built." "No," I replied. "I am revealing what you built." Silence. Then his voice softened. "Eleanor, we can fix this. Claire is very upset. The family is under a lot of stress." Family. The word no longer held power. "Do not contact me again," I said. "Have your attorney speak to mine." I hung up and blocked his number. In June, the board placed Marcus on administrative leave, pending investigation. In July, Claire stopped speaking to him. She came to see me one afternoon, exhausted, shaken. "I didn't know," she said. "Not all of it." I believed her, and still, I did not soften. "I love you," I told her, but love does not erase consequences. By August, Norwich's reputation was unraveling. Clients asked questions. Partners resigned. The early retirement package they had offered me was quietly withdrawn from the table, as if it had never existed. Too late. I had already built something else. A foundation in my mother's name, supporting women over 50, navigating career displacement and financial manipulation. Ruth Whitaker Foundation. It felt right. One afternoon, as summer light filled my living room, Harold called one last time. "It's done," he said. "He's finished." I thanked him and hung up. I did not feel triumphant. I felt complete. And I knew the final reckoning would not be loud. It never is. It would be slow, public, inevitable. And it would belong entirely to them. The first public crack appeared in September, not as a headline, not as scandal, just a subtle absence. Norwic's annual charity gala, a carefully curated affair held every fall in downtown Boston, released its guest list. Marcus Hale's name was missing. So was Claire's. I noticed because for years, I had been the one approving that list. I did not attend. I watched from a distance as former colleagues posted photos online. Smiling faces, champagne flutes, strategic optimism. The comments told a different story. Strange year. Feels different. Anyone know what's going on? By October, the inquiry was no longer confidential. A junior analyst, barely 30, resigned abruptly and filed a whistleblower complaint. Harold had warned me this might happen. When pressure cracks a structure, the weakest point breaks first. The complaint referenced compliance failures, undisclosed conflicts, executive intimidation. Marcus was named. I was not. That distinction mattered more than anyone realized. Claire called me late one night, her voice unsteady. They froze our accounts, she said, just temporarily. Marcus says it's procedural. Is it? I asked gently. She started crying then. Deep, exhausted sobs that told me she had been carrying fear longer than she admitted. I didn't know he was doing those things, she said. I thought he was just ambitious. So did I replied. Silence stretched between us. What happens now? She asked. That depends on what you choose next. She did not answer. 2 weeks later, Claire moved out. She did not move in with me. That was important. She stayed with a friend. Distance creates clarity. In November, Norwick announced Marcus's termination. Carefully worded, mutual agreement, no admission of wrongdoing. But the damage was done. Clients pulled out. 2 board members resigned quietly. The firm began restructuring under external oversight. And then came the call I had not expected. A reporter from a financial journal. Ms. Whitaker, she said, we're doing a piece on leadership transitions and institutional memory. Your name keeps coming up. I agreed to speak on background only. I did not mention Marcus. I talked about systems, about how organizations fail women over 50 by treating experience as expendable, about how loyalty is often mistaken for weakness. The article ran 2 weeks later. I was quoted anonymously, but those who mattered recognized my voice. Claire came to see me after Christmas. She looked thinner, older, wiser. I filed for separation, she said. I nodded. I don't know who he is, she continued, or who I was becoming. You're allowed to find out now, I said. She hesitated. Do you hate him? I thought of Marcus's smile, his careful language, the way he had tried to reposition me as a problem to be solved. No, I said. I understand him. That seemed to unsettle her more than anger would have. The will became public in January, not because I announced it, because Marcus's attorney challenged it. He claimed undue influence, cognitive decline, emotional manipulation. Every tired accusation women of my generation have faced when we refuse to comply. The case was assigned to probate court in Middlesex County. The hearing was scheduled for March. Claire did not attend the first session. Marcus did. He looked diminished, not defeated, but exposed. When his attorney suggested my mother had been pressured, I stood calmly and handed the judge a folder. Letters, medical evaluations, independent legal counsel documentation, a timeline of Ruth Whitaker's mental acuity. The judge listened carefully, then asked Marcus a single question. When did you first become aware of this codicil? Marcus hesitated. His attorney objected. The judge waved him off. Marcus answered, after her death. And yet, the judge said, you acted as if you were entitled to manage assets you had no legal authority over. The room was very quiet. The challenge was dismissed within the hour. The discretionary trust clause stood. Claire's inheritance was placed under my control for 10 years. She did not protest. Afterward, she found me in the hallway. I'm not angry, she said softly. I'm relieved. Relief looks like grief at first. Marcus did not speak to me again. He left Massachusetts 2 months later, took a consulting role in another state, lower profile, fewer questions asked. The firm never fully recovered. As for me, I did not return to corporate life. I taught workshops on financial autonomy for women navigating late career transitions. I mentored quietly. I lived deliberately. One afternoon, sorting through my mother's things, I found a note tucked into an old cookbook. You do not owe anyone access to your silence. I smiled. The revenge was never destruction. It was clarity. And clarity, once achieved, cannot be taken from you. The strangest part of surviving a public collapse is how quiet it becomes afterward. By spring, Marcus was gone. The court matter resolved. The firm reduced to a shell of its former certainty. The calls stopped. The emails dried up. People who once orbited my life like satellites recalculated their trajectories. And then, without warning, the invitations began. Panels, luncheons, closed-door discussions with women I had never met, but who somehow knew my story in fragments. They did not ask for details. They asked for language. How did you know when to stop complying? What do you do when the betrayal comes from family? Does it ever stop hurting? I answered honestly. It stops hurting when you stop explaining yourself. One evening in April, I attended a small fundraiser for displaced professionals over 50. Nothing glamorous. Folding chairs, bad coffee, real stories. At the end of my talk, a woman approached me with trembling hands. My son works at my company, she said. He's doing to me what yours did to you. I felt the weight of that sentence settle between us. What should I do? I did not hesitate. Document everything. Say less. And do not confuse love with permission. She nodded, eyes wet. That was when I understood the scale of what had happened. This was not just my revenge. It was a pattern interrupt. Claire was slowly rebuilding her life. We spoke weekly, carefully, without assumptions. She had moved into a small apartment near Cambridge, taken a leave from work, started therapy. She did not ask for her inheritance. She did not pressure me. That restraint mattered. In May, she invited me to lunch. I owe you an apology, she said, hands wrapped tightly around her glass. For what? For not protecting you. For letting someone else speak for me. I studied her face. My daughter, older now, sharper, less certain, more real. You believed the version of events that made your life easier, I said gently. Most people do. She swallowed. I won't do that again. I believed her. Then she said something unexpected. Marcus reached out. I felt my spine straighten. About what? He wants to meet, to talk. He says he needs closure. Closure. Another word that disguises entitlement. What did you say? I said no, she replied. For the first time, I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. That was the moment I knew the cycle had broken. Not because Marcus suffered consequences, but because Claire stopped absorbing them for him. The following week, the reporter called again. This time, she wanted to quote me by name. I agreed. The article ran under the headline, "The Cost of Quiet Women." It was shared widely. Messages poured in. Gratitude, rage, recognition. And then came the backlash. Anonymous comments, speculation, accusations of bitterness, vindictiveness. One email suggested I had orchestrated everything out of jealousy. I deleted them all. When you have lived through real erasure, noise no longer frightens you. One night, sitting alone with a glass of wine, I realized something else. I had not once asked how Marcus was doing, and that told me everything I needed to know. The call came on a humid June afternoon. It was from a number I did not recognize. "Eleanor," a familiar voice said. "It's Marcus." I almost hung up. Almost. "What do you want?" "I'm not calling to argue," he said quickly. I need to explain." "You had years to do that," I replied. "You chose strategy instead." Silence. "I'm leaving the state," he said. "Consulting. Lower level. I thought you should know." I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the garden I had planted the year my husband died. Everything grows eventually, even after ruin. "Why?" I asked. "Do you think I need to know this?" Another pause. Longer. "I guess," he said slowly, "I wanted you to see that I paid a price." There it was. The need to be witnessed. Even now. "Marcus," I said calmly, "your consequences are not my responsibility." He exhaled. "You really don't hate me, do you?" "No," I answered. "I outgrew you." The line went dead. I did not feel triumphant. I felt finished. That summer, the foundation expanded. We partnered with a legal clinic, offered pro bono reviews for women navigating estate pressure, workplace sidelining, family financial coercion. The stories were endless. Different details, same architecture. One evening, sorting through emails, I found a message from the woman at the fundraiser. She had followed my advice. Her son had been removed from a leadership role, pending review. She ended the email with one sentence. They thought I was too old to fight back. I smiled. Claire came by the following Sunday. We cooked together, slowly, comfortably. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Not stepping back sooner? Not keeping the peace? I thought about the lobby, the missing name, the pastries cooling in my hands. No, I said, because peace that requires your disappearance is not peace. She nodded. As the sun set, I felt something settle into place. The story was no longer about betrayal. It was about inheritance of a different kind. Not money, not power, but self-possession. And that, I knew, would be the legacy no one could take from me. The lawsuit did not come from Marcus. That surprised everyone. It came from the firm. Norwick Financial Group filed a civil complaint in late August, alleging breach of fiduciary duty, reputational harm, and unauthorized disclosure of internal information. The language was aggressive, polished, designed to intimidate. I read it alone at my dining table, legal pages spread out beside a cup of cooling tea. My name appeared more times than it had in years. It was almost flattering. They wanted to make an example of me. The irony was almost elegant. I called my attorney, Mara Feldman, a woman who had built her career defending whistleblowers and women executives discarded by institutions that once depended on them. She skimmed the complaint and smiled. They're scared, she said. This is theater. They want to drain me, I replied. They want you quiet, she corrected. Those are different things. We filed a response within a week. Calm, methodical. Every claim countered with documentation, emails, timelines, evidence that I had acted within my role until the moment I was excluded, after which I had disclosed nothing but my own experience. Truth, it turns out, is difficult to sue. The discovery phase began in October. Norwick's internal communications were subpoenaed. Board members who had avoided my calls now had to answer questions under oath. Marcus's name appeared again. Often. So did mine. In one email, a board member wrote, "Eleanor is the risk. Not because she's wrong, but because she won't play along." I read that line 3 times. For years, I had been praised for my discretion, my steadiness, my ability to smooth conflict. The moment I stopped smoothing, I became dangerous. Claire attended one of the depositions. She did not sit near Marcus. She did not speak to him. Afterward, she came to my house and sat quietly on the couch, hands clasped. "I didn't know how much they talked about you," she said finally. "Like you weren't a person, just an obstacle." I nodded. Institutions talk about women like that when they forget we built them. The case dragged into winter. Norwick's stock dipped. Not catastrophically, but enough. The board proposed mediation. Mara asked me what I wanted. I thought carefully before answering. "I want my name cleared," I said, publicly, "and I want their internal review findings released." She raised an eyebrow. "That will hurt them." "Yes," I said. "It should." The mediation lasted 2 days. On the 3rd morning, Norwick agreed to a settlement. They would issue a public statement acknowledging my role in the firm's growth, affirming that no wrongdoing had been found on my part, and attributing compliance failures to internal leadership decisions made after my reassignment. They would also fund a 5-year grant to the Ruth Whittaker Foundation. I signed without hesitation. When the statement was released, my phone exploded. Messages from former colleagues. Apologies, gratitude, regret. One stood out, from a woman I had mentored years ago. "You showed us what happens when you don't disappear quietly." I closed my eyes. That night, for the first time since the lobby, I slept without tension in my jaw. The next morning, the newspaper ran a follow-up piece. This one had my name in the headline. Winter softened into early spring, and with it came a strange calm. The lawsuit was over. The inheritance secured. The firm exposed enough to make its point. Marcus was no longer part of my daily consciousness. I thought that would be the end. I was wrong. In March, I received a handwritten letter. Not an email, not a text. A letter. The return address was unfamiliar. Inside, the handwriting was careful, controlled. Eleanor, I am not asking for forgiveness. I am asking for understanding. I have lost my marriage, my position, my reputation. I know you believe this is deserved. Perhaps it is. But I need you to know that I never intended to destroy you. I simply believed I knew better. I folded the letter slowly. Belief is a dangerous thing when paired with entitlement. I did not respond, but I did think about him. Not with anger, with distance. People like Marcus do not wake up evil. They wake up convinced they are right. That conviction had cost him everything. Claire came by that weekend. We walked along the Charles River, the air cold but bright. He sent me a letter too, she said quietly. I stopped. And? I didn't answer. I squeezed her hand. That was the right choice, I said. She nodded. I used to think closure came from conversations. Now, I think it comes from clarity. I smiled. That evening, alone again, I opened a drawer and pulled out my mother's last letter. The one I had read in Vermont. Being in the way is proof that you still matter. I had mattered. Enough to be removed. Enough to be fought. Enough to be feared. The revenge had not been loud, or cruel, or immediate. It had been structural. I dismantled the lie that I was expendable. And in doing so, I gave myself something no inheritance ever could. A future that belonged to me. The apology I never expected arrived without ceremony, not from Marcus, not from the firm, from the board. It came as an invitation to a closed-door meeting in early May, held in a neutral conference center overlooking the harbor. I considered declining. I had nothing left to prove. But curiosity is not weakness. It is information-seeking. I arrived 10 minutes early. Old habits die slowly. 3 board members were already there. All men. All familiar. All visibly uncomfortable. Eleanor, the chair began, standing. Thank you for coming. I nodded and took a seat. They spoke carefully. About misjudgment. About institutional blind spots. About how loyalty is often punished when it threatens succession plans. None of them said sorry. They did not need to. Instead, they offered me something else. A seat. Not at Norwick. That door was closed forever. But on the advisory council, overseeing financial ethics compliance for regional firms. A visible role. A symbolic one. We believe your perspective is needed, the chair said. I believed him. But not for the reasons he thought. I will accept, I said slowly, on 2 conditions. They leaned in. First, I continued, this role must include direct oversight authority, not ceremonial presence. The chair nodded quickly. Second, I said, my acceptance must be publicly framed not as reconciliation, but as recognition. Silence. Then one of them said quietly, that will require us to acknowledge our failure. Yes, I replied. It will. They agreed. The announcement was released 2 weeks later. It did not mention Marcus. It did not mention the lawsuit. It mentioned my name, my experience, my refusal to disappear. Claire called me that night. I'm proud of you, she said. I didn't know institutions could admit fault. They rarely do, I replied. Only when it becomes more expensive not to. Our relationship was still tender, still new, but it was honest. That mattered more than comfort. Later that week, I received an email from the Foundation's legal clinic. A woman in her late 50s had successfully blocked her sibling's attempt to force her out as executor of her father's will. She wrote one line at the end. I stopped apologizing for existing. I sat back and let that sentence settle, because that had been the real crime they accused me of. Existing beyond usefulness. The final public reckoning came quietly, the way most lasting things do. Norwick rebranded, changed leadership, issued a diversity and inclusion initiative focused on inclusion across age. Too late to matter to me, but perhaps not to the next woman. I did not attend their launch. I was elsewhere, standing at my mother's grave in Vermont, spring flowers blooming despite the cold ground. I kept my word, I told her softly, and for the first time, I felt no weight in saying it. On my 64th birthday, I woke before sunrise and sat by the window with a cup of coffee, watching the city slowly wake. No calls from Marcus, no messages from the firm, just quiet. I thought about the woman I had been when this began. the one who believed competence would protect her, that family loyalty was reciprocal, that dignity required endurance. I did not judge her. She had done what she knew how to do, but I was not her anymore. The foundation had grown beyond anything I expected. We funded legal workshops, emergency grants, and confidential consultations for women navigating late career betrayal, inheritance manipulation, and family pressure disguised as concern. We never advertised revenge. We offered language, options, proof that clarity is not cruelty. Claire joined the foundation as a volunteer that summer, not because I asked, because she wanted to understand the systems she had once trusted blindly. One afternoon, as we reviewed grant applications together, she looked up at me. "Do you think this would have happened," she asked, "if you had just stayed quiet?" I shook my head. "No," I said. "Silence only preserves what already exists." She nodded slowly. That night, I received one final message from an unknown number. "I hope you're well. I'm trying to rebuild. I understand now that I mistook control for leadership. Marcus." I read it once. Then I deleted it. Not out of anger, out of completion. Because the final act of revenge is not forgiveness. It is irrelevance. I am no longer part of his story. He is a footnote in mine. If you are listening to this and feel that familiar tightening in your chest, that quiet pressure to accommodate, to smooth, to disappear so others remain comfortable, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not difficult. You are not bitter. You are not replaceable. Sometimes the most powerful justice is not confrontation, but withdrawal of access. Not shouting, but stopping. If this story resonated with you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Share your thoughts below. I read every single one. Your story matters too. And it does not end when someone decides you are no longer needed.